The sun was falling low over the Montana hills, spreading long shadows across the dusty town of Iron Creek. It was auction day, and the whole town had gathered around the wooden platform in the square. Horses stamped their hooves and tossed their heads, ropes pulling against tired hands. The air smelled of hay, dust, and the faint sweetness of summer grass. Clara Bennett stood beside the horses that had once belonged to her late father. They were strong, well-trained animals, her father's pride and her last chance to save the ranch he left behind. She brushed her gloved hand along the neck of the lead mare and took a slow breath to calm herself. Her heart was heavy, but her eyes stayed steady. People were whispering. Some said she was brave for coming alone. Others said she was foolish, trying to do a man's job. Clara didn't care. She had grown up around these lands. She could ride, rope, and work harder than most men she knew. Selling these horses was her only way to pay off the debts that hung over her family's name. The auctioneer, a loud man with a voice rough from years of shouting bids, called the crowd together. "All right, folks, let's start with this fine mare bred right here in Iron Creek by the Bennett family." Clara watched the crowd. Some farmers raised their hands, offering fair prices. A few ranchers nodded in respect. They remembered her father. For a moment, hope flickered inside her. Maybe, just maybe, things would go right. Then the crowd shifted and the laughter began. Hank Mercer had arrived. He pushed through the crowd like he owned the place. Everyone knew him, loud, proud, and trouble wherever he went. His boots hit the ground hard, his hat tilted low, and his grin stretched wide. He carried himself like the rules of the town were made for other people. Clara saw him and felt her stomach tighten. She had hoped he wouldn't come. The last time Hank had been at an auction, someone left with more than just an empty pocket. "Well, well," Hank said loudly, looking straight at Clara. "Didn't know we let ladies run auctions now." A few people chuckled nervously. Most looked away. No one wanted to draw his attention. Clara stood tall. "I'm not running it," she said evenly. "Just selling what's mine." Hank tilted his head. "What's yours, huh? Well, I'll make it easy for you. I'll take that mare off your hands." $10, the crowd went quiet. It was a ridiculous offer. Barely enough for a saddle, let alone a horse like that. Clara knew it, and so did everyone else. But no one spoke. "Her starting price is $50, she said softly. Hank laughed, loud and mean. "50 for this horse? You've got nerve, missy." He stepped closer, eyes sharp. "I said 10. Clara's hand shook slightly, but she kept her voice calm. "Then you're not buying." The crowd shifted uneasily. Everyone could feel the tension building. Hank wasn't used to being told no. He stared at her for a long moment, then smiled the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You sure about that?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Yes, I'm sure." Hank's grin faded. His jaw tightened. Without warning, he raised his hand and struck her across the face. The sound echoed through the square. Her hat fell to the ground. For a second, everything was still. The auctioneer froze mid-sentence, the horses stirred, and the people looked down at their boots. No one spoke. No one moved. Clara didn't cry. She simply stood there, one hand pressed to her cheek, staring at the man who thought he could break her with one gesture. Her heart pounded, but her pride held her together. From the back of the crowd, a quiet voice spoke. "That's enough." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't loud, but it carried through the air like a command. The crowd parted slightly as a man stepped forward. Eli Ward was known to everyone in Iron Creek, though few could say they really knew him. He owned a ranch up near the foothills and rarely came to town. Tall, lean, with calm gray eyes and a face that never gave much away, he had the quiet strength of someone who didn't need to prove anything. He walked slowly toward the auction stand, his boots crunching softly on the dirt. The air seemed to grow heavier with every step. Hank turned to face him. "You got something to say, Ward?" he said, voice sharp. Eli stopped a few paces away. He didn't answer right away. He looked at Clara, then at Hank. His eyes were steady and cool like steel in the winter. "You've had enough fun for one day," he said quietly. "Go home," Hank laughed. "Or what, you gonna make me?" Eli didn't reply. He reached up, took off his hat, and placed it gently on a fence post beside him. Then he rolled his sleeves once, slow and deliberate. The small gesture made the crowd step back. No one had ever seen Eli angry before, but everyone could feel something changing in the air. Clara whispered, "Please, don't," but Eli didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Hank. Hank tried to smirk, but his voice trembled slightly. You don't scare me, rancher, Eli spoke softly. Then stop proving it. The two men stood still, facing each other, the whole town holding its breath. Even the horses seemed to quiet down, their ears twitching as if they could feel the tension too. The sheriff appeared at the edge of the crowd, hesitating. He looked at the scene but didn't move closer. Everyone knew Hank had friends in the wrong places and no one wanted to start a war. But no one wanted to watch another innocent person be humiliated either. Clara wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Her cheek still burned, but her mind was fixed on the silent rancher standing between her and the man who had hurt her. Eli wasn't shouting, wasn't threatening, he was just there, like a wall no one could move. Hank finally took a step forward. You really think you can tell me what to do? He sneered. Eli didn't flinch. I'm asking you once, he said quietly. Walk away. For a long moment, no one breathed. The only sound was the wind whispering across the dry street. Hank's hand twitched near his belt, but Eli moved first. His hand came up, quick and firm, not with anger, but with precision. In a heartbeat, Hank froze, staring into Eli's calm gray eyes. Something in that silence made him hesitate. The crowd could see it, the moment when bravado turned into fear. Eli stepped closer, his voice low enough only Hank could hear. You'll leave this town alone. You'll leave her alone. Understand? Hank's pride faltered under that quiet strength. He took a step back, his eyes darting toward the crowd. The smirk was gone. He muttered something under his breath, turned, and stumbled away toward the saloon. No one followed him. No one spoke. The crowd slowly began to move again, whispers spreading through the air like ripples in water. Clara stood still, her hands shaking. Eli bent down, picked up her hat from the dust and brushed it clean before handing it back to her. His touch was gentle, his expression calm. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once. Take care of your horses, he said quietly. They deserve someone strong. Before she could say another word, he turned and walked away through the crowd. People stepped aside for him without a sound. The auctioneer cleared his throat, trying to regain his voice, but no one seemed ready to speak yet. Everyone had seen something they wouldn't forget. As Eli disappeared down the main road, the last light of sunset fell over the town. Clara watched him go, her cheek still sore but her heart strangely steady. For the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel alone. Somewhere out there beyond the hills walked a man who didn't talk much, but when he did, the whole town listened. The auction resumed in silence. Bids rose fair and honest this time. No one dared make a cruel joke or whisper a harsh word. By the time the last horse was sold, the stars had begun to appear, and Iron Creek felt just a little different, like the world had quietly shifted towards something better. And Clara Bennett, standing under the moonlight with her father's old horses sold and her pride intact, knew that justice didn't always come from loud voices or fast talk. Sometimes it came from a quiet man who refused to look away. The morning after the auction, Iron Creek was quieter than usual. The gossip had already spread through every corner of town. People whispered about how the silent rancher had stood up to Hank Mercer. Some said it was the first time anyone had ever seen Hank back down. Others said Eli Ward's calm eyes were scarier than any gun in the West. Clara Bennett tried to ignore the talk. She was busy loading the last few things onto her wagon. The horses she had sold had fetched fair prices, and though it wasn't enough to make her rich, it was enough to pay off her debts. She should have felt relief, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the man who had walked away without saying much more than a few quiet words. She touched the brim of her hat where the dust still clung to the edge. It reminded her of the moment Eli had handed it back to her, the small kindness that had meant more than she could explain. As she finished tying down the last bundle, Sheriff Lane walked up, his boots crunching in the dirt. He was an older man with kind eyes, worn down by years of trying to keep peace in a town that often forgot what peace looked like. "Morning, Miss Bennett," he said, adjusting his badge. "Heard you'll be heading back to the ranch today." "I will," Clara replied politely. "There's plenty to fix before winter." The sheriff nodded, then lowered his voice. "You should know Hank Mercer won't be causing trouble for a while. He's cooling off in a cell over in Clearwater. Word is he's not taking it well." Clara felt her chest tighten. "He'll come back, won't he?" Lane sighed. "Men like him don't forget when someone stands up to them. But he'll think twice before trying anything here again. The town saw what happened. He lost his power the moment folks realized he could be stopped." He looked off toward the horizon. "You were brave, Miss Bennett. But if anything happens again, you find Eli Ward. That man's got a quiet kind of strength I've only seen once or twice in my life." Clara smiled faintly. "I don't even know where he lives." "Up in the North Hills," the sheriff said. "But he doesn't take kindly to visitors." Clara nodded, though she wasn't sure why she cared so much. Maybe because she hadn't properly thanked him. Or maybe because he had reminded her what decency looked like in a place that had almost forgotten. Weeks passed. Iron Creek returned to its slow rhythm of work and trade. The summer heat gave way to cool evenings, and golden leaves began to fall from the cottonwoods that lined the main street. Clara rebuilt her ranch one day at a time. She mended fences, cared for her remaining horses, and planted winter feed. Every day she grew a little stronger, her confidence returning like sunlight after a long storm. But still, sometimes at dusk, she'd glance north toward the distant mountains and wonder if the silent rancher was watching the same sunset. One chilly morning, she rode into town to collect supplies. As she passed by the sheriff's office, Lane called her over. "Bad news," he said, looking worried. "Hank Mercer's been released. Some rich friend of his posted bail. I don't like it, but the law's the law." Clara's heart sank. "Do you think he'll come here?" "I hope not," the sheriff said, rubbing his jaw. "But if he does, we'll be ready this time." He handed her a small paper bag of nails she'd left last week. "And Miss Bennett, don't you go worrying. You've got folks on your side now." Clara smiled softly, thanked him, and turned her wagon toward home. But all the way back, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the past wasn't finished with her yet. That night, a soft wind swept across the valley, carrying the sound of distant thunder. Clara was inside the barn, brushing down her mare, when she heard the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel. She froze, the brush pausing mid-stroke. Her heart began to race. She stepped out into the yard, lantern in hand. "Who's there?" she called, voice steady but cautious. From the darkness came a quiet, familiar voice. "Just me." Eli Ward stepped into the lantern light, his coat dusted with travel and his hat pulled low. Clara felt her breath catch in surprise. "Mr. Ward," she said. "I didn't expect to see you." He nodded once. "Heard Hank Mercer's out. Figured I'd make sure you're safe." "I can take care of myself," she said gently, though she couldn't help the small smile tugging at her lips. "I know you can," he replied, "but sometimes it helps to have someone watching your back." He leaned against the fence, his gaze sweeping the horizon like a man who'd learned to trust silence more than words. Clara set the lantern on a post and studied him for a moment. There was something different about him, a tiredness in his eyes, but also a quiet peace. "You didn't have to come all this way," she said. "Maybe I did," Eli answered simply. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind whispered through the grass and the night grew colder. Clara wanted to thank him again, to tell him how much his actions had changed things. But before she could find the words, the faint sound of horses echoed from the trail below. Eli straightened. "Riders," he said quietly. Clara's pulse quickened. "Who would be out here this late?" Eli didn't answer. He stepped forward, his hand resting on the wooden gate, eyes focused on the approaching shadows. Soon 2 riders came into view, even in the dim light. Clara recognized the shape of the man in front, broad-shouldered, confident, and wearing a dark hat she'd hoped never to see again. Hank Mercer. He slowed his horse near the fence, his smile cold. "Evening, Miss Bennett," he called out. "Heard you've been doing well since the auction. Thought I'd pay my respects." Eli's voice was calm but firm. "You should turn around." Hank glanced at him and sneered. "Ward, still playing the hero?" "I'm not playing anything," Eli said evenly. "Go home." Hank leaned on his saddle horn. "Funny thing, Ward. Folks say you embarrassed me. I can't have people thinking that's true. I came to clear things up." The tension in the air was heavy. Even Hank's friend behind him looked nervous. But before Hank could say more, Clara stepped forward. "You don't belong here, Hank," she said, her voice steady. "Leave." Her courage seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment he hesitated. Then Eli stepped beside her, silent but solid as stone. The message was clear. Hank looked from one to the other, his jaw tightening. He muttered something under his breath, yanked his reins, and turned his horse around. The 2 riders disappeared into the dark, their hoofbeats fading into the distance. Eli watched until they were gone. Only then did he let out a slow breath. "He won't bother you again," he said. Clara's shoulders relaxed. How can you be sure? Because he saw what this place stands for now, Eli replied quietly. And he knows the whole town won't look away next time. For a long moment they stood in silence, the stars bright above them. Then Clara turned to him with a small smile. Thank you, she said. For everything. Eli nodded. You don't owe me thanks. I know, she said softly. But I still want to give it. He smiled faintly. The kind of smile that said more than words could. You're stronger than you think, Miss Bennet. Your father would be proud. He turned to go, but Clara called after him. Will I ever see you again? Eli stopped at the gate. Maybe, he said. If the wind carries me this way. Then he lifted his hat slightly and walked off into the night. His figure grew smaller against the moonlit hills until it vanished into the darkness. Months later, Iron Creek changed for good. People spoke up when something was wrong. The sheriff's office stayed busier, not from trouble but from townsfolk finally believing in justice again. And whenever anyone passed by the North Hills, they'd sometimes see a lone rider watching from afar, silent and calm, before disappearing into the trees. Clara rebuilt her ranch stronger than ever. One spring morning she found an old worn hat hanging on her fence post, the same one Eli had placed there at the auction months ago. There was no note, no name, just that familiar sign of quiet kindness. She smiled, touching the brim gently. Somewhere out there the silent rancher still rode through the wild lands, helping where help was needed, speaking only when words mattered most. And in the heart of Iron Creek, his story became more than a memory. It became a promise. That decency, no matter how quiet, could still change the world.